I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting for Eva to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you got to worry about.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Profiler Africa once again. It's wonderful to have you joining us. I am Paul Llewellyn, and tonight we have a really special show for you. So really glad for you to join us this evening. We are talking to one of South Africa's most relentless legal minds. Advocate Gerrie Nel joins us. He is standing by and ready to talk with myself and Gerard. From high-profile prosecutions to his work in private prosecution, we're diving into the man behind the robes and a career that has made headlines and certainly made him a household name here in South Africa and renowned all over the world. Before we get into it, just a quick reminder to please subscribe to Profiler Africa for top-tier true crime content. The more subscriptions we have, the better the channel grows, then the more sustainable true crime content we can bring you. Another way to support the channel and to support independent media creators like ourselves, the alternative media, I think they call it these days, is to become a member. And you also get, if you become a member, you get exclusive access to some extra content as well. So check that out. You can also join our Patreon if you'd like to support the show at patreon.com/Profiler Africa. And I'd like to say a hello to everyone in the chat tonight. You are welcome to share your super likes with us. They're always welcome if you want to drop a badge. And of course, please do share your questions for the advocate, for Gerard. As we go through the conversation, we'll drop in some of your questions and then we'll compile a bunch that we'll tackle towards the end of the show as well. I'm going to first of all say good evening to Gerard Labuschagne, who was the head of head of the forensic psychology section at the South African Police Service from 2001 till 2016. He is, of course, the profiler. Gerard, I don't know if all the other profilers have got the memo yet.
I'm sure they will get it soon.
How are you doing, Gerard? Have you had a good week?
Good week, a long day. I was speaking at 3 different forums about protecting investigators. So that's from the government sector to the private sector, auditors, you name it. So it's quite interesting that all of a sudden there's a lot of interest in how do we keep the people investigating things safe. So that was quite interesting today.
Oh, in demand. I'm glad to hear that. And of course, I think it's we've just got a wonderful show lined up. I think we should just get straight to it, and we should welcome our guest for the evening.
Hello, Paul, and hello, Gerard.
Okay,
hello,
so we've got a whole hour with the advocate, and we'd love you to drop us some questions. I'm going to start off with one, and then Gerard, I'll hand over to you. Advocate, the Bulldog. I mean, this is your moniker, your nickname. Do you recall the first time that you heard that nickname, that it was bestowed upon you?
I can't remember the first time, but I think it's totally misplaced. I think it would Chihuahua would be better than Bulldog. No, can't remember when it was the first time, but I don't think it's fitting. I do think I'm a Chihuahua or something.
Chihuahua or a Bulldog in the wrestling? Who are you going to back? Who's going to make the better?
In wrestling, I'll go with the Chihuahua. You'll be fitter than the Bulldog. Yeah.
There you go. Well, it's lovely to see some old work colleagues together to have a chat. Gerard, I hand over to you.
Yes. Okay. So, I'm just trying to think. The first time that we met would have been in the lead up to the Oscar Pistorius trial. If I recall correctly, you had your offices in the building next door to my offices, and I kind of wandered over and said, hey, by the way, I spent the morning with Oscar the day he was arrested, and if there's any help that you need, let me know. And I think that was the first time that we'd ever had any contact, and of course, spent a lot of time with that case with you. So unless it was earlier, but that's what I remember.
It's also what I remember, and I mean, you were part of the trial, and you were only allowed in because you came every day with Stollards. What was her name? Bronwyn. You came with Bronwyn. So Bronwyn was your ticket in.
Yeah, people didn't want to see me. They just wanted to see Bronwyn.
We wanted Bronwyn there.
I remember
because
specifically.
with you, we allowed you in.
I remember specifically when people don't know, we're jumping ahead a bit, but they gave us a room in one of the judges' rooms, an empty judges' room in the courthouse, which was very unique. You know, prosecutors aren't typically given a room like that. And I remember I would walk in the morning, and people would kind of look at me, and then they kind of look to see behind me if Bronwyn's also coming along. So no, yeah, not particularly interested in me. But when we get to the Oscar case, though, I mean, I always like to ask guests, and it's always interesting to hear their answers. Like, but when did you first realize that you wanted to be, a prosecutor?
I always wanted to be a prosecutor, and I still only want to be a prosecutor. I think I have the personality to only be a prosecutor and nothing else. So I've been a prosecutor in court daily since 1984. Now, I joined government service a bit earlier, but I've been a prosecutor since 1984. It was a different time then, Gerard. We started at the lowest level in court. I started in traffic court. From traffic court, I went to district court, and district court you did shopliftings and assaults and criminal injury and those kind of matters. And then you were promoted to the regional court. Now, that was a big thing. And in the regional court, you did more serious crimes like housebreaking, murders, culpable homicide, and all those matters. And then from there, I joined the office of, as was then called, the Attorney General. I joined the office of the Attorney General in Pretoria, and I became a senior advocate in Johannesburg at the Attorney General's office. And I'm sure people will still remember the Attorney General of the Transvaal, Advocate Klaus van Lieders und Vulkau. And then from there, Gerard, I became the head of the Scorpions in Gauteng from inception until we were disbanded. And in 2017, I created the first office for private prosecution. So I've only been a prosecutor, and I never wanted to be something else. I never wanted to defend anyone or become a judge or a magistrate. I just wanted to be a prosecutor.
So when you went to study law, did you know that I'm going to study law to be a prosecutor, or did you kind of get into law and then sort of discover the options of prosecuting?
I could only study with a bursary from the department. So, and you knew that if you have a bursary, that's what you'll do. You'll become a prosecutor. So I can't remember that I thought I'll be a prosecutor for life when I joined. If you're young and you study, you think you can become anything. But slowly but surely, I thought that this is what I want to do, and that's still what I want to do. It's now 41 years later. I go to court still on a regular basis, and that's where I feel comfortable.
And what would you say was the first case that you did that kind of really stands out for you as a memorable case, and kind of what was the reason for it standing out?
Interesting matter. I'm at the regional court in Pretoria, and in walks a young warrant officer. Now, I say young, it's just because she looks young. I'm older than her. She's older than I am, but she looked younger, and she still looks younger. And Sharon Skitter. So she walked into my office with a case where one of the ladies of escort agency went out, and she was raped. Lots of prosecutors and lots of people said you can't rape somebody from an escort agency because they agree to whatever happened, and they pay the money and they agree. But this was a bit different. She agreed to go with one person, but there was somebody else in the boot. And when they both got out, she decided that that's not what she agreed to. It was a very long matter, and we succeeded in getting a conviction on rape on both of them. And Sharon was then elected the first police woman of the year. She later became the first female general in the detective service in the South African Police Service. And when I established the Office for Private Prosecution, by that time Sharon has retired, and she joined me for 2 years. So Sharon and I go way back. But I must say, she became the policewoman of the year, and I remained absolutely nothing.
That's the lot of prosecutors. You don't get mentioned, you don't get rewards. It's just the job that is the reward. Now, I mean, I remember Sharon because she was my first boss when I joined the police. And so she was on the panel that interviewed me. And she was a phenomenal manager. I think at that point she was a brigadier. And we were based in serious and violent crime. And then, and really just got what we did. She really understood it. She was incredibly supportive. And I think when she became the first general of when they shut down the murder and robberies and they became serious and violent crime units, I think she was the very first general of serious and violent crime. And of course, the very first, I think, female general in that similar kind of role as the murder and robbery type of general. And wow, and then I think she went on into becoming head of the high-tech unit. And like you said, then she retired. So really a person that I think dearly of even till today. So how soon in your career was that particular case?
Sure. I was in a regional court, so that must have been way before 1990. So it's about, I checked today, I think it's an 89. It's an 89, that matter. Because when I did the research today, I saw a big photograph of Sharon on the front page of the Huisgenoot as the first policewoman of the year because of that matter. If I could tell you something about the matter now, Sharon was married to a policeman, an Afrikaans-speaking policeman, and she could speak Afrikaans very well, but in fact, she's an English speaker. And we consulted in English, and we worked in Afrikaans, and we worked in Afrikaans. And when she walked into the witness box, the magistrate asked her English or Afrikaans, and she said English. I almost died. I didn't know what to do, but I had to struggle through leading evidence in English. It was a long time ago, so it was interesting. She still remembers that. She wrote an article about how embarrassed I was and how I struggled to get evidence. I struggled to lead her evidence.
Yeah. And in those days, I mean, what were the sentences for rape? Because it was very different compared to nowadays. I mean, the length of sentences was perhaps quite shocking for people nowadays.
Yeah, it was shocking. A conviction, you hope for a conviction, sentences were 5-6 years maximum, I think. But I'm so glad it changed because I think we learned more about rape and what rape's really about, and I do think that we should focus more, and they don't do it. They pay lip service to the fact that we want to protect the vulnerable in society, but we don't. We try and do a lot for that. We try and do a lot for all the vulnerable people because I do think that we failed them.
Yeah, and like I said, I think was in 2007 or even before that the sentences. I think now the minimum sentence for a standard rape, if I use that terminology, is 10 years, and then it jumps up to 59 life. Under certain. So I do think that's a bit more appropriate. And of course, the definition of rape's changed quite dramatically compared to what it would have been back in those days. And it's more a 21st century definition.
Yeah, but I'm glad it changed. I mean, all the things that we struggled with early on, it's easier to prove rape, and it should be. It really should be because women are in a vulnerable position, and it's also difficult to prosecute because mostly the men are the people with the money and the big careers and friends everywhere. And nobody wants to believe a woman if she cries rape, especially in a relationship. And I think we need to do much more about that, especially women in a relationship. So we really ask people to speak out, come out, talk to us. And if nobody else will listen, somebody must listen to them.
Now, when we were doing a bit of research about today, you were involved in a case that I had no idea that you were involved in. I guess there's no reason I necessarily would have. And that was actually the prosecution of the people that murdered Chris Hani. And that his death obviously was at a very sensitive stage in the development of our modern country, could have led to the country being in civil war. Tell us a little bit about what it was like. Did you kind of realize the kind of importance and relevance of that case at the time, and any kind of just stories about that whole prosecution?
It was a big case. And so I still remember it happened on the 10th of April, was a Saturday, that's a Sunday. I still remember driving my car thinking, this is a big case. I would really like to get involved in this matter because it was a big case. And then Advocate Lars van Leerders and Vuko asked me to be a junior in the matter. So as a junior, myself and Mike Holmes. Now, Captain Mike Holmes was an absolute brilliant investigator. He investigated that case by himself. And so we investigated the matter, and then we later prosecuted the matter. I want to tell you one or two things about it that I think people forgot. And remember that it was on a Sunday. Mr. Hani just came back from the shops. He bought the Sunday newspaper. Mr. Wallace drove past, stopped, and shot him, walked up to him while he was lying on the driveway of his garage, and shot him at point blank. A white woman drove past. Rita, what was her name? I thought about this afternoon. I'll think about it now. Harmse. She drove past, stopped, reversed, and phoned the police and told them what happened. And the interesting aspect of this, she took down the registration number of the car, but she did it wrongly. She took down the wrong registration number. She phoned the at that time flying squad. She phoned the flying squad, and the constable at the flying squad took it down wrongly, sent out the radio message at the time, and two policemen were driving, and they stopped behind this red, it's a Ford car, Sentra, I think. They stopped behind the car, and they thought, okay, it's almost the same registration number. They will just check. They got out, and when they walked past, they saw the gun at the back seat, and they arrested Mr. Wallace. So it happened he was arrested 10:10 on the 10th of April, 1993, and within 10 minutes of him having committed the murder. And I think that was very, very fortunate for our country that we arrested people immediately. And what's also interesting, Gerard, is that it happened in April. We had a trial date for June, and the defense wasn't ready in June. And I think we started then in August, but by October, the accused was sentenced. So it was a matter that really ran. And I think also what people seem to forget about that case is that both Mr. Darby Lewis and Mr. Wallace were sentenced to death. So they received the death sentence, which was later changed in the Supreme Court of Appeal to a life imprisonment.
If I might jump in here, and
yes,
of course, I mean, Wallace was deported back to Poland just this past December, having served out his sentence. It's one of those things that comes up regularly on the show, is the fact that folks who were locked up 20, 25 years ago are starting to be released from prison. How do you feel about somebody like him being released, considering he got a death sentence initially?
So I'm a prosecutor. If I argue for a sentence and I get a sentence, I have to believe that that's a sentence that the person will sit. So if it's 25 years, if I argue it, that's what I mean, and that's what I want to happen. And it's life, that's what I want to happen. And if I argue and I say that this person cannot be rehabilitated, is inherently wicked and intrinsically bad and all those kind of things, and the only suitable sentence would be life, that's what I expect will happen. But I understand that the sentence regime in this country, and I understand parole, and all I say is it should be applied equally to all. And if there's one standard, and we apply that standard to every accused in this country, then we understand it, and you can apply the law, and you understand the law for parole. So, but as a prosecutor, if I argue a sentence, I don't argue a sentence thinking he will do 2/3, and therefore I have to ask for 25 instead of 20, and so on. If I argue a sentence, it's exactly what I want the person to serve. I think what he deserves to serve. And if a judge listened to all the evidence before him, and he's received lots of reports from everyone, and he's applied his mind and both parties had an opportunity to convince him, then I find it a bit strange that we think that later we can change that. But I'm not saying there shouldn't be parole. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that because we have parole, just apply it equally to all.
Sure. Gerard, before you jump, I just want to, I mean, everyone on the chat is so excited to see you on the show with us here, Advocate. So I'm just going to say, we just want to drop in some of mentions of some of the folks who are on the chat. First of all, hi to Louise joining us from Auckland. We hope the weather's good over there. Absolutely love Gerrie Nel, not a bulldog, but a serious Rottweiler in court, sir, and we love you for that. Norma van Jaarsveld, sir, you are the best. Then we've got Marius joining us again from the Southern Cape. Good evening, Marius. We'll jump over. Good evening. I'd like to compliment you on the brilliant Pistorius prosecution. I watched it with awe. I also prosecuted for over 20 years and never wanted to do anything else. So there you go, folks. Thank you for your comments. And please do drop your questions on the chat and we will pose them to the Advocate as we go, and keep a couple to the end as well. Gerard.
Yeah, I just want to say earlier that, yes.
You wanted to refer to Coetzee and Brown, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's another case, which I just for the viewers, I only realized this tonight before the show started that Advocate Nel was the prosecutor. So some of you might or might not remember the case of John Frank Brown and Samuel Jacques Coetzee. Now, Coetzee was a cross-dresser, to use the terminology of the day. Brown was his same-sex partner. And they, to make a long story short, I think in the end picked up 5 people. One was a teenager, 4 were adults. I think one was the Coetzee's gardener, family gardener. Other 2 were sex clients, etc. And ultimately killed these 5 individuals. And with one of the victims, they'd cut off the genitals. So quite kind of gruesome murders. And now I know Coetzee, as you correctly pointed out before the show started, committed suicide before his trial. Brown was then the only one who went on to be convicted. And actually, Johnny Brown was one of the people that I interviewed for my master's and my doctorate for many years. And then when I was in the police, I would go see him in prison every now and then. And he actually still phones me probably every Sunday, every second Sunday, just to say hello from prison. And I didn't realize that you meant that you were the prosecutor in that particular case until you mentioned it before the show. So, I mean, what kind of stands out for you about that particular case?
2 things. Firstly, Coetzee's mother was in court every day. A beautiful lady, loved her son to bits, supported him to the end. And he didn't commit suicide before the trial started. It was during the trial. So there were lots of confessions and statements. And I think at the end of the state's case, we closed the state's case. And it was on a Friday. I remember it clearly. The investigating officer was Leon Nel, also a brilliant investigator from East Rand murder and robbery. And on the Friday, Coetzee called us over and said, he just want to thank us. We treated him very nicely and very fairly. And that was it. I never thought it was serious. The man said that we treated him fairly. And then he committed suicide on the Sunday. And then I realized that he was really just saying goodbye on the Friday. And that he knew by that time that he committed suicide. And but also, it was a different time and very much different than today. So on Monday, the prison services arrived at court and said the man committed suicide. So the judge said, we were all very sad. And the judge said, okay, do you have a death certificate available? I said, no, we'll get one. So we only postponed for the death certificate. When we got the death certificate, we carried on to the trial. So it's unlike today when there's long breaks in matters. We started and finalized matters in the old days. I'm not saying the old days are the better days. I'm just saying there were old days, and I'm part of the olden days, and that's how it worked then. I'm not saying it's better than today.
Yeah. So actually, you'd finished the state's case, and then Coetzee committed suicide.
Yeah,
okay. I didn't. I thought it was much. Yeah.
Both of them made confessions, and I think if you go back and read about it, that's why they were able to report that the first murder was because Brown got jealous because he was there,
yes,
and that was what they did. he would just see what's happening, and he would be part of what they're doing, and he got jealous. That's how they killed the first person, and then from there it escalated.
Yeah, because as you said, Coetzee would cross-dress quite convincingly, and that's how they lured some of the people who became victims.
Yeah, he lured them as a woman, and during the trial, that was one of the points we focused on. Every person that they lured into a flat, or people would pick them up and take them, all believed that he was a woman, and obviously there were lots of photographs of him as a woman, and that was a very convincing cross-dresser.
Wow. Yeah. And I've actually got the judgment somewhere, for it's quite interesting to read it there. They think that the judge referred to him as fopdossers, which I'd never heard of that term before.
Yeah, you have to be very careful with the P. It's a fopdrosser.
But you mentioned Leon Nel, and I mean, he was a legend. Was it the East Rand murder and robbery, I think. And he was, of course, involved, if I'm not mistaken, he was involved in the Norwood serial murder and also Moses Atole's serial murder investigation. Absolute legend who passed away a couple of years ago. I think, sadly, had cancer. But yeah, really a real legend in the field, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Leon Nel was, and I said before the show started, in my career, I did very interesting matters, and the one matter I want to refer to is Hazel Kitson, and I want to refer to the matter because I think it's the locus classicus for participative monitoring. I mean, lots of people say you cannot record a meeting if you're part of the meeting, and you must ask permission from people and all those kind of things. Now, what happened in Kitson, her husband was he was the headmaster of a school, and she had a gambling problem. So she would gamble and stay away from home. And during one of the gambling outings, she met someone and said, if we kill my husband, I will inherit lots of money, and we can then gamble. She then arranged for him to follow her home and to kill her husband. He got cold feet. He didn't do it, and she then did it herself with a mallet and a rubber mallet and a knife. And the police arrested him because she said she saw a car just drove off, and it must be him. And the police arrested him. And the interesting part, and why I want to mention this case, is when they arrested him, he said, it wasn't me. I tell you, it wasn't me. I know who it was. If you don't believe me, give me a tape recording. I'll go to her and I'll record her. And the police sergeant gave him a tape recorder. He spoke to Hazel Kitson, and she confessed. They discussed their prior arrangement. So it was all about, can we hand in the recording to corroborate his evidence? And long argument, and the judge was Judge Cameron. Now, Judge Cameron then gave an unbelievable judgment. It's one of my top 5 judges I ever appeared before. He gave an unbelievable judgment, and but with common sense. He asked only one question. If you're allowed to testify about what happened, why can't you have the best evidence rule and use a recording? Why would you test your memory if you have a recording? So if it's admissible as evidence, why is it not admissible as a recording? And so it's still the local prosecutors on the matter. And so that's also a matter that I think it was worthwhile doing. And I did, I think, 3 cases with Judge Cameron. And he's a remarkable man, and he was a remarkable judge.
And of course, he wrote a very interesting book about his life growing up, and he went to Pretoria Boys High, my old school, and of course he became in the Constitutional Court judge, if I'm not mistaken.
Constitutional Court judge, and so no, he was a remarkable person, and that was one of the cases that stood out for me. And perhaps just mention one other case before we get to cases that people know. We also did the first. I prosecuted in the first Stanley killing. The accused was a man called, what was his name? I wrote it down. I have to just, Phoenix, Arizona Sheldon Bucker. Phoenix, Arizona Sheldon Bucker. That was his name. He called himself the Prince of Satan, and he committed the murder at the Zoo Lake. And so I'm a prosecutor. People were very worried about this satanic Prince of Satan, and I didn't believe in it. I said it's just a murderer. People were very worried about me, meetings about me, not understanding how serious this is. And but we got him convicted, and so that was the first satanic killing. And I mean, I'm sure you knew the people, Robbie Rabalt and is it Jonker, Colonel Jonker, that also involved in that. Because it was a satanic killing. So those were the matters that I think it's significant and worthwhile mentioning in my early career. And you know, I agreed to come on this show because I'm now an old person and I like to tell stories. So the people at my office run away because I have to sit, we pay their salaries, they have to listen to my stories. And now I get the opportunity to tell stories and people want to listen to them. I want to tell one more story.
Yeah.
And
Go for it.
also an investigator, Major Heiliger, Gerrie Nel. He was a investigator at murder and robbery West Rand. And we did the matter, and I still remember the matter well. His name was Button, and he came from a pub and he walked past a shopping center, and there were two homeless people lying there, and he empties his gun into them for no reason. And during the trial, he was on bail, and he failed to arrive at court. So a warrant was issued. And Gerrie Nel was just promoted from a captain to a major. And I said to him, you know, if they promoted a detective to a senior officer, he's useless. You can do nothing with him. All they want to do is look at dockets. They don't want to work anymore. And he said to me, he'll show me. He will arrest Button over the weekend. And what happened is he then established that Mr. Button was in a pub in Heidelberg. Gerrie drove there and started drinking with Mr. Button, and they had lots to drink. And when they really had lots to drink, Gerrie Nel phoned the officer on duty in Heidelberg. It was a young female lieutenant, and she came there and he said, "Listen, I am Major Nel from murder and robbery. You have to arrange for me somebody must take me home. I can't drive, and this person you have to arrest and make sure that he's in court Monday." And he was a court Monday.
Definitely different times.
Yeah. So Gerrie Nel. Whilst I'm talking about investigators, you know, we talk a lot about not about prosecutors, because have you ever seen a Hollywood movie where a prosecutor looks good? They're bumbling fools. It's always all these defense people, isn't it? Think of what's that big matter they had with the football player.
The OJ trial.
Yeah, poor prosecutor, but Billy Cochran, and all those people had all the great ties on every day and all the suits. So, you know, if you watch a Hollywood movie, the defense people are brilliant. Luckily in South Africa, it's just the opposite, isn't it? We have brilliant prosecutors. The defense are not good. But so I would just I have to mention investigators. You know. I've worked with absolutely brilliant investigators in my life, and I don't think they get what they deserve because we go up there, we prosecute, the judge gives a judgment, but all the hard work that they do, I don't think people see. Last week, you guys discussed Van der Heever. Now, the investigator in Van der Heever matter was Major Willie Steyn, later became a colonel. One of the best investigators I ever worked with. I think if you discuss matters again one day, or just find out about Bellingham, he arrested Major Bellingham, and the investigation he did there was absolutely brilliant. But the investigation he did in Van der Heever matter was absolutely brilliant, and I was so glad when you sent me the docket's investigating diary, and a young Gerrie Nel wrote a long piece about Major Willie Steyn and what a asset he is to South African Police Service and so on. And I meant every word I said. Then obviously I've done lots of cases with Andrew Leask, and Andrew Leask is still in my unit, still working for us. He's still our chief investigator. Even with his time at murder and robbery in the West Rand, we did lots of matters with him. He was the chief investigator in the Selebi matter, which is a very important matter, and I think we should perhaps discuss that. And in all the big matters that I've done, Andrew played a huge role. And when we established the Scorpions, he became a chief investigator in Scorpions, and in now as part of the private prosecution office. Obviously, Mike Van Aert, who investigated the Oscar Pistorius matter, and Piet van der Spy, who investigated the Gous and Monnier case where they killed the mother in front of the creche in Ferry Glen. Because of a dispute about access to the child. So those are the people that I want to mention. I can mention many more, but I do think, and because I have the opportunity, I want to say that I honor all the good policemen, the people that really worked hard. And being a prosecutor, you realized how hard they worked to get you those statements. A docket doesn't compile by itself. So it's first investigation and a case docket. But if you ask people about me, they will tell you that if they gave me a docket, they kissed goodbye to the docket, because I lose things. And if I don't lose things, I destroy things. So investigators that knew me well would arrive in my office and give me a docket and said, that's yours. You can do whatever you can do with it what you want to. I don't want to see it again because I know I won't. No, I before we started, you say, do I miss, my early life? I must say I miss good detectives that arrived at my office with a docket that you can be proud of. In the early days, the docket would be brilliant. We never had computers. We before computers, it was typewriters, or they wrote it by hand. But they will have everything, the MR number or the CAS number would be clearly indicated in red ink and underlined and double lines and things like that. So that's what I miss. I really do miss investigators that are proud of handing a case over to an advocate to prosecute, and that would sit there every day, to check up on you and make sure that you do your duty because they've done theirs. So that's what I miss. I don't see that. I don't see that anymore. For those policemen that do it, I'm really glad they're still doing it.
Yeah. If I might, gentlemen, just drop in with some of the commentary here from the folks who are on the chat. First of all, from Pierre, worked with Advocate Nel at the Scorpions SNPU, brilliant mind and a heart of gold. There's no shortage of interesting cases in South Africa. What a place to practice law. I mean, I think that is a salient point. Listening to this show while studying for psychology is so motivational, as it is my dream to become a profiler. Love listening to your stories. I'd like to thank Arena Fantonda for your super chat. Fantastic hearing about the less known cases. Thank you, Advocate Nel. And also from Katzen. We appreciate your super chat as well. And one more. I saw and greeted Advocate Nel during COVID on the Bokomlaan Veldhof. I did not want to bother you, sir. You got a number of ridiculous quarantine cases dismissed in minutes at Leiplek Court. Respect. Okay, guys, thanks. Please drop some more questions, folks. Advocates, I just have a question about your kind of perception of the legal system as we maybe get into your Scorpions era and then into the Jackie Selebi case. But what was your feelings of kind of the trajectory of the criminal justice system post the 1980s, through the 90s, into the mid 2000s? It seems like that, the Jackie Selebi case was kind of when you knew, okay, there's some pretty serious problems here in South Africa, but they'd obviously been building. Just kind of, leading up to the Selebi case and maybe through your period at the Scorpions, what were your thoughts on the trajectory of the criminal justice system up to kind of, the naughties?
Yeah. Well, I said so before, and I'm saying it again, that the criminal justice system has collapsed. It's a fact. We can't even send witnesses to court without legal representation. I think we've got lots of hard work to do to bring credibility back into the criminal justice system, to let people trust prosecutors, trust policemen, trust investigators. We cannot do without that. About the Scorpions, sitting where I'm sitting, I do still think it's the best concept that there ever was. I think it's the only way that you can really deal with organized crime or any other crime is to have the concept of the Scorpions, and that is what we still apply in our office. Where prosecutor and investigator work together from day one, so that you both know where you want to go, that you collect the evidence in the way you want it and the way you want to present it, and that you work hand in glove from the start. That's the only way you can deal with organized crime. That's the only way that you can solve serious crime. I know that we have the investigating directorate, but again, we've got silos. Policemen report to policemen and prosecutors report to prosecutors, which is not conducive of investigating and getting to the evidence in a real matter. With real matters, I refer to the Jackie Selebi matter. That was a real matter. I mean, I think people forget, and people should forget. I was arrested. I was arrested at home and kept in custody, and lots of things happened. But I wasn't the only victim, if you want to call me a victim. Mr. Vusi Pikoli lost his job because of the Selebi matter. And whilst I'm talking about Vusi Pikoli, that is the person with the most integrity that I've ever worked with. And the Selebi matter was only possible because I had a team of competent, committed investigators that never got scared. And that's the most important issue. If your prosecutor is arrested, you don't know what's going to happen. They never ran away. They came to my aid. I was arrested, and the next week we had to fight an application in court, and it was successful, and we made it public that we're prosecuting Mr. Selebi in the week after my arrest. But if it wasn't for Mr. Pikoli as a National Director of Public Prosecution with the utmost integrity that prosecuted a friend and told the friend himself that we've decided to prosecute you, it wouldn't have been possible. That's what we need. It's not easy to prosecute high-profile people. It's not easy to prosecute the Commissioner of Police, who's the Interpol's chief, and who, when you take him to court, he wasn't suspended. He was still a policeman, and all the generals arrive at court to support him when you put the case on the roll. So that's what we need. We really need people of integrity. We really do need a team. You cannot do it without a team.
And what was the grounds for your arrest at the time? What was the allegation or the charge against you?
They used somebody that worked for the Scorpions was arrested for corruption, and they then said I knew about it and I did nothing about it. But the matter it wasn't real merit in anything. But without the team, one can easily fall apart when things like that happen. When you're arrested and you don't have support. I must say, I was arrested. I had support of my team, and by then, Mr. Pikoli wasn't the national director anymore, and Mr. Kokim Shea was the acting director general. And if I have to tell a story, he called me in and said, is there any truth in it? I said, they can embarrass me, but they can't convict me. And he said, it's enough for me. Let's work. So you need that support. And Gerard, I think it's very much what you did today, isn't it? Where the investigators become the investigated because there's no other way out, especially in high-profile cases and good cases. If there's a good evidence against yourself, what can you do? But focus on the prosecutor or the investigator, and they become the investigator. So, but let me rather focus on good news as far as Selebi is concerned. Now, I do think the Selebi matter is absolutely important for one issue, and that is for the definition of corruption. Now, that definition was followed by the Supreme Court of Appeal in two other matters, and the Bongo matter, the latest matter, the Supreme Court of Appeal confirmed the definition of corruption. Now, if you read the Corruption Act, it's difficult to read the Corruption Act. But if you follow Judge Joffrey's definition of corruption, it's so clear and so easy that if you read the newspapers from now on and you apply that definition, you can't understand why they don't prosecute people. There must be something wrong, and it must be a selective prosecution or unwillingness to prosecute. Because the definition of corruption summarized is, if you receive a benefit from someone and it creates a dynamic whereby you'll be indebted to do him favors, that's corruption. So you don't have to do something. It's a mere receipt of or agreement to receive a benefit in order to do something which creates a dynamic whereby you'll be indebted to a person. That is corruption. So I think that happened in the Selebi matter, and I think for that one reason, the Selebi matter is very important, and that's for the definition of corruption.
Now, as you briefly said, Selebi at the time was the head of the National Commissioner for the South African Police. He was the top cop. And I think, like you said, he was also at the same time the head of Interpol. So this was an incredibly held very important positions at the time, but I've also, of course, had a very long struggle history in the sort of fight against apartheid. So this wasn't a simple matter of just a very high-profile person. It's a high-profile person with a lot of history. So, you had people, I think, on all sides of the spectrum who probably weren't very happy with you, if anything, because of his history and the good things he did during the struggle, of course, made it very unpopular for you to be prosecuting him for that reason. What exactly, in a nutshell, because I think we have some youngsters here who don't know exactly what he ended up doing. What were the key allegations against him in your trial? And then, of course, what was he sentenced to?
Gerard, it's very difficult to summarize it, but let me just say that when was this trial? It was in 2000. Well, the sentence was in 2009, I think. Started in 2008 to 2010. So it's a long time ago. People that are now 15 years old was born then. So he had a friend, Agliotti. Remember Mr. Agliotti? Mr. Agliotti knew that he had to really get the Commissioner of Police on his side, and he could do lots of things by having a friend like the Commissioner of Police. And the Commissioner of Police was, and that was the allegations we made, was at his beck and call to attend birthday parties, to discuss cases with people that Agliotti wanted him to discuss cases with. Inter alia, Mr. Rautenbach, who came all the way from Zimbabwe to have a private discussion with the Commissioner of Police on the 11th floor of a hotel in Sandton. So it was a general corrupt relationship between Mr. Agliotti and Mr. Selebi, whereby Mr. Selebi did Mr. Agliotti favors, and Mr. Selebi responded by sharing a top secret report they received from the British police about investigation in South Africa. So I also think that's important. It's very difficult to pinpoint corruption incidents in a general corrupt relationship. So we charged Mr. Selebi for the existence of a general corrupt relationship with a few corrupt incidents. And I think that's also made it so much easier to prosecute the matter.
And Agliotti was kind of a known organized crime gangster person. So he wasn't just some non-entity. I mean, he was someone involved in the criminal underworld, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he was involved in the criminal underworld. He was convicted of charged him for dealing in drugs and hashish that came into the country. So he was a convicted drug dealer, and it's a conviction we got against him. But he was a influencer. It's before influencers, but if Agliati was there today, he would have been an influencer. That was the kind of.
I was actually nearly involved in a project. We did a pilot for a reality show with his wife, and he would have featured in the show. So when you say influencer, he certainly didn't shy away from the limelight.
And what was he ultimately sentenced, Selebi? What was his sentence?
15 years. He was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment. He was released on parole, and it was real parole. Shortly after his release, he unfortunately passed away. So in that instance, if we talk about parole, in that instance, I think it was worth it, and I think it was necessary, unlike perhaps other people that received parole for medical reasons and are still playing golf.
Didn't die.
It seems that the legacy that Selebi left behind in the kind of some of the structural changes that he made in his time at the police. I always remember we were interviewing Tolly Vreugdenburg and kind of asked him why he thought that, all the specialist units at the police had been shut down. And he'd said something along the lines of that it was they always felt that it was because they were being too effective at their job. So they needed to kind of neutralize some of the efficiencies in the police. And that seems to have been a problem that's kind of sustained itself and worsened over the years since the Selebi era.
I'm an old person, and you know that I prosecuted in a long time ago, and I prosecuted with murder and robbery units. I prosecuted with sun-up people that focused on drugs. And I do think that if you really want to investigate a certain type of crime, you need to be an expert in that area. You need to be a murder and robbery cop to be able to investigate murder. You need to be a sun-up cop to be able to understand the drug world and to deal with the drug world. So I'm all for specialization, and so I don't understand why we did it. I was never in favor of it, and I think we lost unbelievable capability of investigating murders. And only, even if we just talk about the informant network of all those murder and robbery cops that they had, which we lack today. The cops that I worked with had an informant network that was really, really effective and big, and they could solve crimes with the informant networks.
And the passing of the torch is also so critical. And, when you lose that momentum where experienced officers are passing on that kind of wealth of knowledge to the younger generation, it's really difficult to get that back, because you've got to start from scratch again.
Yeah, Paul, what you're saying is so important. I mean, experience you cannot buy. Experience takes time. Experience takes people that take you along an investigation, takes you to go to court and sit through a case and then understand it. So it's very easy to think for people to tell you what a court case is about, but it's different if you Andrew Leask and we work on a matter for 2 years before we prosecute the matter, and then you prosecute the matter for a year and you live the case. And in all the big cases, I mean, every matter, that's a matter that I lived. And the same with the Pistorius matter. It's a matter that you start and that's all you focus on. And, I'm a typical man. I can only focus on one thing at a time. So that's what you need to do. And if you've never done it, it's very difficult to explain to people what it means to really focus day in, day out for months at end on one case.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we talk about this regularly. Fortunately, we get the benefit of Gerard's expertise here on the channel because, he's, me and Gerard are the team essentially. But, it's just crazy that the nation doesn't get the benefit of Gerard's expertise, for example. just what a shame that is never lost on us, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think 2006, there was, as you said, Selebi that shut down the serious and violent crime unit, the drug unit, the firearms units, the sexual offences units. And like you said, that was a huge impact. We were in the middle of, we just arrested the Quarry serial murderer, and our task team was shut down as a result, just randomly one day, shut down all task teams and specialized units. And it was really just, I don't think the police have ever recovered from it. Now, I see what time is progressing. We're going to probably get a big tongue lashing if we don't at least touch on the Oscar Pistorius case. And of course, we also want to give you time to speak about what you're doing now, which is the private prosecutions. Now, we don't want to rehash the whole Oscar case. That'll take forever. But what were the kind of key things for you about that case? Personal moments, just reflections upon it after all these years.
Two things I want to mention immediately. Firstly, when the TV approached us and wanted to have a direct transmission of the matter, I opposed it with everything I had. I thought it cannot happen, it shouldn't happen, but I changed my mind. I think it's the best thing that can happen. I think we should have more matters on TV. People must be able to go into a court, to experience a court, because that's what happened in the Oscar Pistorius case. I think people realize that it's a real matter. It's not a game, that people are really working hard. It's a matter of life and death, and that it's serious, that the court matter is serious. And then obviously everybody became an expert. You know, I received the best explanation of dolus eventualis from a golf caddy who told me what dolus eventualis really is. And he was right. He was 100% correct. So I think people realized what the court case is all about, what the law is all about. How would we have ever had the opportunity to tell people that intention could be in the form of dolus eventualis without that case? And I think there's lots of other law and legal principles that I think people should know, and that is how they learn about it. That's the first thing. The second thing is my belief, and I think it was illustrated by the Selebi matter, that law is a process and not a case. So at first, we didn't agree with the judgment, but there's an appeal, and you can take it further, and you have to follow the process until you get justice. And sitting where I'm sitting, after all these years, I still believe in justice. I still believe that if you follow all these processes, if you get to the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein, you will get justice, and that's what make it worthwhile to go through all these matters, even if you don't succeed at first. If you do the right things and you believe in your case, then eventually you'll get justice. And I believe in it, and I have to believe in it to be able to do what I'm doing. So those are the two things I really took away from the Oscar Pistorius case. And then there were lighter moments in the matter, and we discussed it before, just before we came on air. And it was the Battle of the Blondes between myself and Barry. Now, my blonde was Bronwyn Stollards, and I was happy my blonde was Bronwyn Stollards. And as I said, Gerard, you also benefited by being able to sit with us because of Bronwyn.
Yep. No, thanks a lot.
So that's
and I mean, that was, I think a lot of people don't realize that was the first case where from start to finish it was ever televised in South Africa. You know, we'd had a judgment maybe being televised. We've had a witness testifying being televised, but never a start to finish trial. And I think this is probably still being used by law lecturers as, you know, an example of how a case can work. Obviously, it was a little bit not your normal case, but I think it was a massive, for that alone, that we had this complete televisation. There was a 24-hour channel, the Oscar channel running, to televise from start to finish the actual whole case.
And I think also, I then later, had discussions with people, and they realized that what you put into a trial, you're in court the whole day.
Yeah.
Then you go home and there's consultations because you have to prepare to be ready for the next day. So your day don't stop at the end of the court day because you have to prepare for the next day. especially in the Oscar Pistorius case, we just kept on going and going. So I just hope, and I believe they did, people realized it's not a game, it's hard work, and it's serious. And then obviously I have to say that Mr. Barry Roux, the opposition, is by far the best defense advocate in this country. And that made it easier, believe it or not. It's easier to prosecute a matter if you're prosecuting against a competent, opposition. Yeah. He never missed a beat in the matter. You always knew what it was about. You knew what he would do. And so I think the fact that Barry was the defense advocate in that matter also played a huge role. And I said so before, and I say it again, if I ever get in trouble, there's only one stop for me, and that's Barry Roux.
Yeah, a man of great integrity is my experience of him. Yeah.
Okay, so now I have to talk about private prosecution. Before I see it, we past our time, so I've got 2 minutes.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
We advocate. We can. It's YouTube. It's the future. So we can chat as long as you're willing to stay with us. Just FYI.
Before you move on to that, though, I wanted to ask one thing about the Oscar case. I mean, because it was televised, it obviously had a huge impact on your life at the time. And I remember you saying to me, "Geez, I can't even go to the shops to buy a loaf of bread." Because like everybody recognized you. How else did it kind of impact upon your life at the time?
It was that, and it was normal things. Normal things like going to a shop. So you will walk in a shop, and people will check what you're buying, what you're doing, and that caught me a bit. But I must say, yes, the support I got from people that. Just showed their appreciation, and that was brilliant. I got lots of support from lots of people, and I always ask them, "Are you a Roux? Are you Barry Roux? Or are you Gerrie Nel?" and so on. So we played that game. It had an impact, but if I think back and I experienced what I'm experiencing now, I think it was more positive than negative. The negative is just because I've been a private person all my life, very private, and did my own thing. And then you just have to realize that perhaps people are watching. And then on the other hand, you cannot lose you can't get angry with people because there are people watching and they know who's getting angry with someone. So even at people that would drive in front of you and road rage, you just waved because you can't get upset. People would recognize you. But Gerard, to say, I must say, it was more positive than negative for me by far.
If I may, you've said before in previous interviews that I've watched that you've taken part in Advocate that you would never obviously prosecute somebody who you didn't believe was actually guilty. In the Oscar case, what did you feel was the kind of most compelling piece of evidence? So we still get folks on the channel who will kind of defend Oscar to the death almost. But what was it that made you go, okay, I believe, I will prosecute?
Okay. I'm going to answer this question, but I really don't want to go into the merits of Oscar Pistorius. But what I will say is the following. I will say that I have not argued anything in the Oscar case that I did not believe 100%. Everything I said in argument, I believed 100%, and that was in the Court of Quo and in the Supreme Court of Appeal. So that's how far I want to take it, Paul. Sure. I really don't want to get into the merits of the Oscar case.
Okay. I think then, Gerard, we should move on to, the current period that you find yourself in. What was it that made you in 2017 choose to make that shift?
The unbelievable opportunity to create something new. To be able for somebody to say, develop the concept of private prosecution and do it in the way that you want it. And it was just absolutely brilliant. I had a career in the NPA, and I then started a new career at an advanced age. And I still enjoy going to court every day because we're building something new. It's something exciting, and it's now something essential. You know, when we started this private prosecution office, it was to deal with those people that were politically sheltered from prosecution. And we focused on lots of those. But in the meantime, the criminal justice system collapsed. And we're getting to do with more normal cases in the sense that people aren't assisted with real facts and easy cases that they just don't decide not to prosecute for various reasons. So that's the one thing. So we're creating a concept that is becoming more and more important and essential, and we have to develop this concept. We have to make it easier to privately prosecute. We have to make the kind of crimes that you can privately prosecute easier to do there. I mean, we have to extend the law, expand the law to include the prosecution of corruption. We have to be able to privately prosecute corruption, because that's the one thing that I think that the NPA is failing, and that is to prosecute corruption. There's lots of arrests. You've all seen arrests. There's arrests of Mr. Ismagashile. There's arrests of lots of people, but they never get prosecuted. This years later. So, and that's not what you want. You don't want an arrest and not a prosecution. So if I have to use the Oscar Pistorius case, if you're ready to take somebody to court, you must be ready to prosecute and not have an arrest and then start investigating. So I criticize that, and I've got lots of, but I don't think we have time to do that, of criticism for the NPA, where either they fail to or they do it inadequately. I mean, there's been discharges in two unbelievably big cases, and those are cases that have been investigated over years. So you must be able to investigate matters over years and be ready to go to court. And you also cannot have a matter prosecute someone and then a witness you think is in fact a defense witness and it's not in the country anymore, and all those kind of bungling. So I think it's absolutely essential to do prior prosecution. And the one aspect that makes it so much easier for me and so much more exciting is that the court team that investigated the Selebi matter is part of my office. So the Scorpion court team that investigated Selebi is now the court team in the prior prosecution unit. We know each other well. We know what it's about, and we've been through it. We've been through all those things, and that's why we're successful.
Which is exactly what we're saying, that expertise and continuity, how critical they are.
Unbelievably.
A question from Linnell Ballou. Advocate Gerrie Nel, what do you believe is the single most crucial reform needed in South Africa's justice system? How can the new generation of prosecutors actively contribute?
Okay, for me, because of the position I'm in, I think we have to make it easier to privately prosecute, and we have to make it easier for society to privately prosecute and not an individual. So society will be able to privately prosecute corruption matters, because if the NPA now decides not to prosecute a corruption matter, that's about the end of it. Or you have to go to court and force them and to say, in terms of the legality principle, it's irrational and they should prosecute, but that takes lots and lots of time. And I do think that prior prosecution is the answer. I'm going to say something very controversial now, but it won't happen in my lifetime. Yeah, I do think that in years to come after me, that like we did with hospitals and private hospitals and state hospitals and private schools and state schools, that there'll come a time that you'll be able to pick a prosecutor to do your case. It's important to you. You want a specific person to do your case. And I can't see why we can't do it. I can't see why that won't be the next development in private prosecution. So that is, I think, where we should ultimately strive for, to have a prosecutor of your choice. Prosecutor.
And could I be, just for our listeners who might not be fully aware of how this works, and just correct my summary if it's wrong. Essentially, for a private prosecution, a crime occurred, it was investigated by the police, a docket was prepared for a prosecutor, and a prosecutor says, I'm not going to prosecute this case. Now, sometimes that can be for valid reasons. There's not enough evidence, there's no further investigations outstanding, and we're just not going to, it's not a prima facie winnable case. So it's very common to decline to prosecute. But what you're kind of referring to is cases where actually there was a good case, and whether it's through incompetence or corruption that the prosecutors decided not to prosecute, you guys could then step in. You get a certificate of nolli prosecute from the DPP's office, and then you can actually go ahead and prosecute that particular matter. Is that kind of roughly how it works?
Let me, so Paul, I said I'm an old man. I can tell lots of stories, so stop me. I see we've extended our time, but I do think it's important to just run 2-3 facts of cases with you. We had a conviction in a matter where Mr. Bezos assaulted his wife and fractured 6 of her ribs. Now, it was a domestic violence matter. There were 2 of them in a house, and there was an argument, and he fractured 7 of her ribs, and the NPA decided not to prosecute. We prosecuted, and the accused was convicted. There's even a different matter in Malodi, where a woman was sleeping with her brother in a house, 12 o'clock at night. A next door neighbor made lots of noise outside and wanted to come into her yard because somebody threw his car keys on her roof. She walked out and said, "It's 12 o'clock at night. I cannot allow you into my yard, and you can come back tomorrow." He wasn't happy, assaulted her, and they decided not to prosecute. Her surname is Sebotoma, but she made representations. She did whatever she could, and then she got a nolli by herself, walked into our office and said, "Can you help us?" We helped her. There was a conviction, and last week we got a cost order against the state, against the NPA, to recover our cost for the prosecution. So those are the matters. And then we did the matter, and I'm going to be quick about the facts, in Somerset East, where a man came into a house. Him and the victim in this matter started drinking that couple of bottles of wine. She got concerned, phoned a friend, and I can't go into all the facts, but the NPA decided, and they wrote a letter, that the accused saw an opportunity and he used it. And they decided not to prosecute. So we prosecuted the matter, and we are awaiting judgment in the matter. So it's that kind of cases that we're dealing with now. That's over and above the, shall I say, the more political matters and the corrupt matters of where the justice system, and I don't think it's by coincidence. I just think it's because it's a fact. And it's all cases where women were the victims, and gender-based violence, where the NPA decided not to prosecute. Those matters are difficult to prosecute. And I tell you now, we can keep ourselves busy 24/7 on matters against women and children. We can't do them all, but it's difficult matters to do. And I think, let me just say that we're in the very fortunate position that we do this pro bono, because people that arrive at my office are not people in Armani suits. It's people that have to take 1 or 2 taxis to get there, and we're the last resort. We have to help them, and because of AfriForum and the funding we get, we can do it pro bono, and we do those cases pro bono because to privately prosecute is unbelievably expensive, because you have to guarantee the cost of the defense if you lose, and very few people can do that, and so that whole issue, and that's why it makes it so much easier for us to do, and absolutely exciting.
Absolutely. Joe, I was just curious, Advocate. I mean, obviously, the majority of the cases we talk about, murder cases, etc., the victims are women or children. What is it in South Africa, do you think? Why is it such a gigantic problem? I mean, I often feel like almost like there's a war being waged on women and children in South Africa when you look at the statistics and you I'll have conversations with Gerard where, you talk about the reported rape statistics being 20 times worse because of, lack of reporting, people not feeling like they're going to get, the kind of response from the justice system that maybe they should. What is it about the country or the culture of the country?
My answer to that is a typical prosecutor answer. The president refers to it as a pandemic, which it is. It can keep us busy 24/7. Paul, I'm more concerned about the sexual abuse of real young children, which is very difficult to prove, but we get weekly those kind of cases in. So I do think that we should the justice system should be more predictable. If you assault a woman, you will be arrested and you will be prosecuted, and there will be consequences for you. I'm a prosecutor. That's what I believe. I believe that there must be consequences for every matter, and we shouldn't allow withdrawals. We shouldn't allow people not to prosecute, and we should be willing, as a prosecuting service, we should be willing to lose matters to win matters, and in support of women and children. So I just cannot believe why we don't do it.
We are going, we're 15 minutes past 9 o'clock. I think just a couple, I don't want to totally let everyone who's dropping questions, I don't want to ignore everyone in the chat who's dropping some questions. So perhaps we could just look at one or two more of those, and then we can look at just one or two, wrapping up the conversation. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your passion for wrestling and also just kind of what you do to unwind and offload what is, some very serious issues that, are a centerpiece to your life. So let's jump into some questions quickly. First of all, let's have a look here. First of all,
Paul has got an interesting.
From Marius Joubert, part one of the message. In criminal cases, state prosecutors relies on SAPS for proper crime scene processing. It is often mentioned in media and court proceedings by judges of the poor investigations, which resulted in an accused being found not guilty, case dismissed. What advice would Advocate Nel give the SAPS to improve investigations, especially crime scene processing?
I think Gerard can answer that question better, but I've got an answer to it. My answer to that is that we should have the hand in glove, that if there's a matter and if you think the matter is serious, that you should get a prosecutor there. And I don't say prosecutors know better, but I know prosecutors can perhaps direct you on what they think it's important because of the experience. And please, I'm not saying a prosecutor is better. We absolutely horrible as far as investigation, crime scene management is concerned. But it's perhaps just a ear that, why don't you look there? Why don't you do that? And then there's another aspect, and that is, I do think our prosecutors should be more bold and presenting evidence. Although there's some problems with evidence, you shouldn't think that because of one problem with evidence, one person that didn't have gloves on, that the whole crime scene cannot be used. You should be pragmatic about it and say, that is a problem, but we can still use this and we can still use that. And we can still use the crime scene as circumstantial evidence, even if we can't, without a doubt, rely on a crime scene. So for me, it's a hand and glove. For me, it's a issue of training, where Gerard would be better to understand that. And then I think, Paul, you answered it. It's if you're a young policeman and you go on a crime scene with a policeman that's done crime scenes 100 times, then you learn. But that is what we miss. That's what we miss. We miss that skill transfer, on the job skill transfer, I think.
Absolutely. From Paula Gruben, hello from Ireland. A question for Advocate Nel. Do you think a jury trial would be a more or less effective system than a bench trial in South Africa?
I think it will be less effective. I grew up in a justice system where the experts, a judge is expert in the law, you're an expert in the law, you're the prosecutor, the defense is an expert in the law. And you're not only experts in law, in the application of the law, but you become experts in evaluation of evidence And because all those evaluation of evidence has some legal aspect to it. So I will struggle to accept that a jury of my peers will make a decision that is not in, and I use a broad phrase just because I don't know how to put it better, that's not in line with the law that I understand it. So think for yourself. You have to, if there's a jury of your peers, and you have to explain dolus eventualis to them. I mean, we struggled and we argued for days about dolus eventualis, and we read court cases and we rely on court cases just to be able to convince a court that there's dolus eventualis present, and what's the difference between dolus eventualis and negligence, and what the degrees of negligence. So all those kind of things are so intricate and so difficult to explain that I believe that a judge who's an expert in the law would sit there. You know that we had assessors, and I think you discussed it last week, Gerard, assessors that could outvote a judge. And we had one or two of those cases, which was very difficult to do, but it was on the facts. So I prefer that if I argue, and I argue law, and it's law that's difficult to understand, that somebody sitting up there understands what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry we can't get to everyone's questions and comments tonight, but thank you so much for taking part in the chat. Advocate, I mean, as much as intellectual wrestling has been a kind of a staple of your career, physical wrestling is something which, how's it going at the wrestling club these days at the moment?
Yeah, I've been in wrestling since I was 5 years old, so it's now 20 years, isn't it? But my son was a wrestler. My son was an absolutely brilliant wrestler, and my grandchild had his first tournament this Saturday. So it's a sport I love. It's a sport that I think every youngster should do. It builds character. You know, in other sports, there are 15 people on the field, and if you make a mistake, somebody else will pick it up. If you go on a mat, it's you against another person. It's only two of you, and it's amateur wrestling. You know what you see on the Olympics. It's got nothing to do with the WWF or Dricus Duplessis kind of wrestling.
I was gonna say I can't imagine you in a lycra outfit, kind of, you know, with bandanas and things like a.
Yeah. So it's a brilliant sport. It builds the physique of young boys and girls, and it just gives you discipline. It's a sport that requires the utmost discipline, not only in the days that you compete, but in the days of preparation. It's hours and hours of preparation to become good at it, and I think it's a brilliant sport. And as I say, I've been involved since I was 5.
Where else do you find kind of your peace, if you like?
I would call myself a very keen golfer. I think my family would call me a golf fanatic. But that's where I find peace. I play golf whenever I can, and it's because I'm also the best golfer in my group. So if it wasn't for my group, I wouldn't have been able to play golf. So there's always a bet, and they make it possible for me, for my budget to balance every month. And I hope they hear this. But no, I play golf. It's the one sport that I get there, and you can't afford to think of anything else but golf. Yeah. Otherwise, you won't be any good at it. So that's what I do. I relax and I make sure I do.
How's the handicap?
I'm at 11.5 at the moment, the handicap. And I play league, been playing league for lots and lots of years. So I enjoy it.
Fantastic. Gerard?
No, I think that's I mean, as people in the comments are saying, we could talk to you for days and days and days about specific cases, etc. But I do want to comment, you know, by my recollection out of the shows we've done, we've had the most I've ever seen people logging in at any given time was about 86.
Yeah.
By my count tonight, we had 389 was the most. In fact, right now it's 389. So I think it's just a testimony to what you have to say, how interesting the topic is, and a credit to you and obviously the career that you worked very hard to create. And, thank you for what it's worth from my side. And please, I hope we try to convey the importance of the issue of private prosecutions and bringing justice for people when the system's failed. And that's an incredibly important work. And as you say, you're the only unit doing this in the country. And hopefully that'll inspire other NGOs to start doing the same, because you could never deal with all the cases that come to your door that could deserve a private prosecution. So from my side, it's obviously just been amazing knowing you all of these years, and an absolute pleasure in the cases that I've worked with you. And so thank you for what you've done for the country. So
while we're here, any critique of Gerard's performance when you guys were working together?
Do we have another 26 minutes?
No, we don't.
You see,
the Gerard and other people of his unit and other Beryl Foster and those kind of people, I just think that in what they're doing, if we could just get to common sense, things must make sense. If it makes sense, it's something to do. In non-pat matters, if you don't have an amnesia, it cannot be non-pat. If you don't have deep remorse, it cannot be non-pat. It's all those common sense issues, and there Gerard did very well in being able to link the dots to say, if this is not so, then certainly there was no non-criminal incapacity. So that Gerard was able to do very well.
Before we started the show, I'll tell everyone who's watching that the Advocate said we're going to go for an hour, and the Advocate said, "Oh well, I can never do an hour. I don't have enough to talk about for an hour." We promised him it would go very quickly, which I'm sure it has. We've already gone for an hour and a half. So thank you so much for taking the time with us. My last question, if I may, is simply, what is your kind of one message to the nation? What do we need to focus on as a country, as a culture, in order to start to move back towards the kind of justice system that we'd all like to see, so that we can move past this time?
We must make it work ourselves. We must make sure that the people in positions of authority in the justice system focus on prosecutions without fear, favor, or prejudice. I'm a prosecutor. I've been a prosecutor my whole life. And I know that the current National Director of Public Prosecution said, we can't prosecute us out of crime. I don't agree with that. I say we must prosecute ourselves out of crime. People must realize that if you commit a crime, you will be prosecuted. You will be competently prosecuted. So for me, it's just people must realize that the justice system is predictable and that you will be prosecuted. And I really hope that we get prosecutors, that the career of a prosecutor, we just get people that have a passion, that do it because they want to do it. And they want to make a difference. There are lots of those people, let me just say, Paul, there are lots of people that I know in the NBA that are still there, that are brilliant prosecutors. And I hope they get what they deserve in terms of matters and career development.
So let's not lose that little sense of hope that remains. Advocate Nel should start his own YouTube channel. There you go, Advocate. Well, can I say that if nothing else, you are absolutely most welcome back here on Profiler. We'd love to kind of invite you to be a friend of the channel. Talking about the Oscar case, you talked about the impact of it being televised, and just how important it is for people to see and to talk about the justice system kind of in action. And this is a platform, and I think that's one thing about the kind of alternative new media that's exciting, is that it gives the opportunity in the space for these kind of independent discussions and to just share information with folks, not only in South Africa but around the world as well. where do you see, how do you see the media kind of playing a role in the evolution, in kind of fixing the problems, and also AI? I mean, that's got to be something that you're considering, what its influence is going to be in your profession.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned it. In preparation for tonight, I didn't have lots of time, but I tried my best. I realized that when I was a prosecutor, we had no computers, we had no copy machines with the Rodeo machines, and we had typewriters and typing pools, and we had no Google and AI. I do think that we have to adapt in using AI in a very responsible way, and more as a support than as a final product. But it makes it easier. It really does. When if you know the first 2 digits of my ID, you'll know that I'm before computers, and I really am worried about AI at first, because AI, when I grew up, it was artificial insemination with cows, and now we talk about AI, and so I was worried about it. I think I changed my mind. I do think that we should make use of AI. It must make it easier for everyone. It must make it easier for people to prosecute matters, as a guide and as a support, but not as a final product.
Yeah.
And I forgot something. I just want to say something. I don't know when you were last in court. The one thing that irritates me no end is if you sit in court and you can't hear a word. I'm bad because I'm old, but you must be able to hear what's going on, because that's what we have. We have a legal system where people are invited to court so that they can hear. So we should just make sure that people hear what's going on. That's the one thing. And second thing is, prosecutors must, I've seen it now with the police as well. Our job as prosecutors is to be victim focused, because those are the people we represent, the victims. So although there are lots of lip service about being victim focused, I think it's only that. It's lip service. If I get to court and a prosecutor's preparation is to hand a statement over to a victim, say, read it, I'm going to call you now as a witness. How do you do that? You can't do it. And so I do think we have to train prosecutors to make sure that we prepare matters, that we prepare witnesses, so that the witness knows what's coming. Because if you don't know, if nobody prepped you, how will you ever be able to withstand cross-examination from a seasoned advocate? Even if you try your best to tell the truth. So those two things bother me now, and that is the lack of preparation of witnesses, and I can't hear. People should just speak up in a court, so that if I sit in the gallery, that I can at least hear them.
Absolutely. Gerard, your final thoughts? Oh, we've lost Gerard. You've muted yourself there, Gerard. We nearly got through a whole show without Gerard muting himself.
The short answer is no. I think I've said all I hope to say, and express my deep found appreciation for what you do. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Advocate. We really appreciate you taking the time out and for giving us an extra 35 minutes of your precious time. I mean, just all strength to you, really, and just know that if you ever have anything you want to chat about work-wise, and you want to share it with the nation, this is one spot that you're welcome to do that. We'd love to welcome you back in the future.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Brilliant. Thank you, Advocate.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So
and we hit 400 viewers just.
Yes, we did. Gerard, thank you. Wasn't that amazing? Thank you so much to the Advocate for joining us. Thank you so much to everyone for watching and for your ongoing support. I just wanted to say thank you to, let me just see if I can find here. Yes, to Mel van Rooyen, who gifted one Profiler Africa membership. We appreciate you, Mel. And folks, you're also welcome to do that. again, the more support we get, the more opportunity we'll have, and the more, the less we'll have to worry about our day jobs, and the more we can bring you great content here on Profiler Africa. Gerard, thank you as always, as well, for just making this happen this evening. I think it is a testament to how well thought of and respected you are in your industry that we're able to get amazing guests like the Advocate on the show. So thank you for watching, everyone. We'll be back again next week with another episode of Profiler with myself and Gerard. And we'll let you know during the week what's going to be coming up on that show. Unless we want to tease anything now, Gerard, do we? Do you want to talk a little bit about next week? Have we decided what we're doing next week? I think we've got the next week after lined up. But next week we're still talking about
a case next week.
Exactly. We'll be just diving back into a case next week. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate you. Hit the like and subscribe button. Share the podcast with your friends. And we will see you back again soon right here on Profiler Africa. And don't forget, everyone, to keep looking over your shoulder, eh?
I am a human being and I killed human beings.
Before I knew it, I'd fired 4 shots at the door. I kept on shouting for Eva to phone the police.
Tests are underway to determine if a serial killer is on the loose in Centurion, Pretoria.
The dead won't bother you. It's the living you got to worry about.